Brandon Ayuk is back in the middle of the conversation, and at this point, San Francisco 49ers news has turned into the Brandon Ayuk soap opera, whether anybody likes it or not. This is Niners News Today, and the headline here is simple. Ayuk keeps finding a way to make this story bigger, messier, and harder to ignore. And the wild part is that this didn't happen overnight. This thing has been building for a long time, piece by piece, like a bad house of cards waiting for the first hard breeze. Go back to 2023 and the picture was clear. Brandon Ayuk looked like one of the best receivers in football, not just on the 49ers, not just in the NFC, but all across the league. He had earned that respect the hard way. Then the contract talk started heating up, and honestly, nobody was shocked that he wanted a serious payday. That part is football. That part is business. When you play at a high level, you want to get paid like it. Fair enough. But then, the whole thing started to wobble. The holdout got messy. The attitude started to matter. The body language started to matter. And once the 49ers finally paid him, gave him the bag, and made him one of the highest paid receivers in the league, that should have been the clean finish to the story. That should have been the moment where everybody said, "All right, problem solved, now go be a star." Instead, that is where things started getting weird. Because once he got paid, the football part did not get better. It got worse. The effort looked off. The body looked off. The energy looked off. And then the injury hit, which only poured gasoline on the whole thing. From there, the situation really started to crack. The rehab questions popped up. The team issues started stacking. And then the 49ers decided they had seen enough and voided a chunk of guaranteed money. That move was huge. That was the organization drawing a line in the sand and saying, enough is enough. This is no longer just about hurt feelings or contract friction. Now it is about trust, accountability, and whether the player is actually meeting the standard of the organization. And once that happened, the relationship between Ayuk and the Niners seemed to shift from strained to flat-out broken. What makes it even more frustrating for Niners fans is that he did not exactly rush to clear the air. He did not come back and fight for the money. He did not go out there and make a strong public case that he was locked in and ready to lead. He basically let the whole thing slide into the mud, and that silence has said a lot. Sometimes silence is louder than a press conference, and in this case, it has screamed. Now fast forward to the social media side of things, and that is where San Francisco 49ers news gets even more annoying. Instead of workout clips, instead of rehab updates, instead of anything that makes you think, okay, this guy is trying to come back and prove something, we keep getting flex after flex. Cars, jets, cash, money spread out everywhere like he's trying to win some kind of digital flex contest. Cool, you got your money. Nobody is mad at a man getting paid. But when that is the only thing people are seeing from you, it starts to look less like confidence and more like detachment. And that is the real issue. Fans are not just asking whether Brandon Ayuk is rich. Everybody already knows that. The question is whether he is still serious about football. Because if you are another team looking at this situation, what exactly are you supposed to see? A player who wants to help your offense? A player who is locked in on the grind? Or a player who is broadcasting that the lifestyle matters more than the work? That is why this whole thing feels so off. The 49ers wanted a receiver, they paid for a receiver, and now they are watching a guy behave like the football part is optional. That is not a small problem. That is the kind of thing that changes how a fan base views you forever. So let me put it straight. Brandon Ayuk can say whatever he wants with his money. He earned it. But the way this has gone since the contract got done has been immature, sloppy, and frankly, damaging to his own image. And if you are a Niners fan trying to figure out whether there is still a path back here, that is the real mystery. Not the cash, not the posts, not the headlines. The real question is whether Brandon Ayuk still wants to be a football player in San Francisco, or whether this is just a long, expensive breakup that keeps getting uglier by the week. George Kittle really might be the last of a dying breed in the NFL. In the middle of all this tension, drama, contract noise, and social media chaos floating around Niners news today, somehow the guy fighting spiders at 4 in the morning becomes one of the best stories of the week. And honestly, that says a lot about why this fan base loves him the way it does. Because George Kittle feels real. You watch the modern NFL, and sometimes everything feels manufactured. Every quote sounds polished. Every post feels rehearsed. Every interview feels like a corporate seminar wrapped in shoulder pads. Then here comes Kittle, half asleep at 4 in the morning, getting called into action because there's a mutant jungle spider in the bathroom. And suddenly, the entire internet is laughing because every married guy watching already knows exactly how that conversation went. Your wife wakes you up in pure panic mode. You're disoriented. You can barely see straight. But there's no negotiation. There's no debate. You've been activated like some emergency defensive package on 3rd and long. And Kittle telling the story made it even better. The way he described grabbing the rehab slant board like Captain America reaching for the shield was peak George Kittle. That dude has somehow mastered the art of being an elite football player while also feeling like the guy you'd grill burgers with during a Sunday tailgate. That matters more than people realize. In an era where San Francisco 49ers news is constantly filled with contract disputes, injuries, trade rumors, holdouts, and behind-the-scenes tension, Kittle keeps becoming the emotional glue of the team. He brings energy without forcing it. He leads without turning every moment into a speech. And most importantly, he embraces being a Niner instead of treating the franchise like a temporary business arrangement. That is why fans connect with him. And look, the spider story is funny, but underneath the humor is something bigger. Kittle has become one of the faces of stability inside this organization. Through quarterback changes, playoff heartbreak, coaching turnover, roster drama, and constant pressure, he still shows up sounding like a guy who genuinely enjoys football and genuinely enjoys representing the franchise. That is rare. You can tell when players are carrying the emotional weight of the season around like a backpack full of bricks. Kittle somehow manages to compete like a maniac on Sundays while still sounding like somebody who loves the ride. It is part football player, part golden retriever with shoulder pads, part professional wrestler cutting a promo after chokeslamming somebody through a folding table. And the crazy thing is that people sometimes forget just how dominant he still is because his personality gets so much attention. This guy is not just some funny locker room presence. He is one of the greatest tight ends the NFL has ever seen. Period. When you talk about complete tight ends, not just pass catchers, but blockers, tone setters, emotional leaders, guys who can completely alter a game plan, Kittle belongs in that conversation every single time. So when stories like this pop up, it reinforces why the locker room gravitates toward him. He feels accessible, authentic, human. Fans see themselves in him, just with way more muscles and way less fear of giant spiders. And honestly, after all the heavy Brandon Ayuk conversation, this was probably the perfect palate cleanser for Niners news. Because the Kittle story reminds everybody what makes football fun in the first place. Not every headline has to feel like a hostage negotiation between agents and front offices. Sometimes it can just be a football player being a normal guy with a terrified wife and a badly timed spider encounter. Now I gotta ask you this, because every Niners fan has a different answer. If you wake up at 4 in the morning and see a spider the size of a $50 in your bathroom, are you handling business like George Kittle, or are you suddenly forgetting where the bathroom is located? Be honest down in the comments, because some of you are absolutely calling for backup. And speaking of backup, the 49ers are going to need some emotional toughness in this locker room heading into the season, because the next story we need to talk about has some serious edge to it. A former Pro Bowler just publicly called out one of the current starters, and now the entire fan base is split right down the middle over who's right and who crossed the line. The Dante Whitner and Jair Brown situation is fascinating because this is not just random off-season noise. This cuts right into something bigger about accountability, criticism, and whether certain players on this roster are actually ready to take the next step. And if you've been following Niners news today closely, you already know this fan base has very little patience left for excuses after what happened defensively over the last couple of years. Now, first things first, Dante Whitner is not one of these former players who tiptoes around everything to protect friendships. He is blunt, sometimes painfully blunt. But honestly, that's part of why people listen to him. Too many former athletes get into media, and suddenly every player is great, every mistake is fixable, and every bad performance gets wrapped in 10 layers of excuses like a leftover burrito in aluminum foil. Whitner doesn't operate like that. If he thinks a player is struggling, he says it. If he thinks the tape looks bad, he says it. And whether you agree with every opinion or not, at least you know it's real. That matters in today's sports world because fans can smell fake analysis from a mile away. So when Whitner revealed that Jair Brown actually called him and Richard Sherman trying to press them over criticism, that instantly caught fire across San Francisco 49ers news circles. Because now the conversation shifts from football performance to mentality. And this is where things get uncomfortable for Brown. If you are a young safety who has objectively struggled with consistency, blown coverages, tackling angles, and discipline, the last thing you want is for people to start questioning whether you can handle criticism. That is dangerous territory in the NFL. Coaches criticize you, veterans criticize you, film criticizes you every single Sunday in front of the entire football world. That's the league. There's nowhere to hide. Now, to be fair, Jair Brown has dealt with instability. 3 defensive coordinators in 3 years is not exactly the ideal environment for development. One year you're learning one system, then another coach walks in with different terminology, different expectations, different responsibilities. That absolutely matters. Anybody pretending it doesn't is being dishonest. But here's the problem. At some point, the tape becomes the truth. And the tape has not been kind to Brown lately. That doesn't mean he's hopeless. It doesn't mean he can't improve. It doesn't mean he won't eventually become a quality starter. But when Whitner asked him whether he thought he played at a Pro Bowl level, and Brown reportedly said yes, that's where fans started looking around like somebody just claimed a bicycle could beat a Ferrari in a drag race. Because confidence is good, delusion is different. And this is where Whitner's criticism actually makes some sense. He is basically saying, if you cannot honestly identify your weaknesses, how are you going to fix them? That's football reality. Every great player has to self-scout. Every great defense studies flaws. The moment you start believing criticism is disrespect instead of information, growth slows down fast. You know what the best players do after bad games? They attack the tape harder. They don't hide from it. They don't call critics trying to shut people up. They go prove people wrong between the lines. And that is why this situation has hit such a nerve with the fan base, because Niners fans can live with mistakes. Football is chaos. Guys miss tackles. Guys blow assignments. It happens. What drives fans crazy is when a player appears disconnected from reality about those mistakes, especially on a team with championship expectations, especially on a defense that has standards attached to it. And Whitner knows those standards firsthand. This is a guy who played on physical, nasty, emotionally tough defenses. Units that took pride in accountability. Nobody cared about protecting feelings. If you messed up, you got called out. Then you fixed it. End of story. That culture helped build some of the best years of modern 49ers football. Now, some people think Whitner crossed the line by making the private phone call public. I understand that argument. I really do. In a perfect world, maybe that conversation stays private. But Whitner clearly felt like Brown came at him sideways while refusing to accept valid criticism, and he responded publicly because, in his eyes, the criticism was earned. And honestly, The bigger issue here is not even Whitner exposing the call. The bigger issue is this: Jair Brown is entering a critical point in his career. This is not the time to become defensive about criticism. This is the time to absorb every piece of coaching possible and level up fast. Because the NFL moves quick. 1 year, you are a promising young player. The next year, the front office is looking for your replacement while fans debate your future on social media like it's courtroom evidence. That's the pressure of this league, and the truth is, the 49ers need more from him. Not average play, not flashes, not potential. They need consistency. They need discipline. They need reliability on the back end of the defense if this team is going to chase another Super Bowl. So now the question shifts to Brown himself. How does he respond? Does he use this as fuel? Does he lock in and prove people wrong? Or does this spiral into another off-season distraction that follows him into training camp? Because one thing about Niners news, the truth always catches up eventually. The film tells the story every single Sunday. And that's why this upcoming season feels massive for several players on this roster. Not just Brown. For Brandon Ayuk, for the defense, for the coaching staff, for everybody. The margin between contender and disappointment in the NFL is razor thin, like trying to balance a Lombardi trophy on a folding chair during an earthquake. That's why this offseason matters so much. Now, before you get out of here, I want to hear from you. Did Dante Whitner cross the line by going public, or was he right to keep it brutally honest? Drop your take in the comments because I already know this fan base is split right down the middle on this one. And if you enjoyed today's San Francisco 49ers news coverage, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss any Niners News Today updates as we get closer to the season. We are pushing toward 2,000 subscribers, and every single Niners fan joining the channel helps this community grow stronger heading into another huge year for the red and gold. Share the video with another member of the faithful, keep the conversation rolling in the comments, and stay locked in because this offseason is heating up fast, and you already know the drama around this team never sleeps.